My friend Daniel once decided he needed a classy hobby. This was confusing to everyone who knew him, because Daniel once tried to microwave a fork, but one day he proudly announced, "I'm taking a life drawing class." We assumed he meant drawing apples, or maybe a guy holding a guitar. So he shows up at this quiet little art studio. Daniel sits down with a cheap spiral notebook and a pencil he found in his car. The instructor walks in and says, "Welcome everyone. Today we'll be doing nude figure drawing." Daniel said his brain immediately went, "Oh no." Before he can process it, the model walks in. And she's completely naked, not awkward about it at all. Just walks to the middle of the room, strikes a pose like a statue, and everyone in the class calmly starts sketching. Everyone except Daniel. Daniel looks at his paper. He looks at the model. He looks back at his paper. After 5 minutes he has drawn what he later described as a weird stick person that looks like it's melting. But the real disaster starts a few minutes later, because Daniel, who has the maturity of a 13-year-old boy, slowly realizes he's sitting in a silent room, staring at a very attractive naked person, and unfortunately, his body decides to react. Yep, right there in the middle of the class. Daniel told me he immediately thought, "This cannot be happening right now." Panic mode activates. First he tries leaning forward to hide it, but that just makes it look like he's aggressively analyzing the model like some kind of creepy art scientist. So he quickly puts his sketchbook on his lap to cover himself. Unfortunately, his sketchbook is tiny, like barely larger than a sandwich. The instructor walks behind him right at that moment and looks down at his drawing. There's a long silence. Then she says very politely, "That's an interesting interpretation of the torso." Daniel panics and blurts out, "It's a horse. It does not look like a horse." Daniel tries to casually stay seated and hopes nobody notices what's going on. Then the instructor says the worst possible sentence she could say. "All right, everyone, let's all stand up and stretch for a moment." The entire class stands up. Daniel stays seated like a statue. The instructor looks at him and says, "You can stand." Daniel says, "I'm very focused on shading." Daniel has no choice. He stands up while holding the sketchbook in front of him like a shield. But as he stands, the chair leg catches his back. The chair scrapes across the floor. He trips. The sketchbook drops. For about 1 second, the entire class sees both the terrible drawing and why he was trying so hard to hide behind the notebook. I knew to art. The model, who has clearly seen everything imaginable at this job, just calmly says, "Art can create strong reactions." Daniel packed his bag, walked out of the studio, and never returned.